Hello, we're going live. Hi there. Let's move this a little bit so we can get you in there. That light is blazing in the background. We're going to leave it. We're going to leave a blazing light in the background. Hello, I've been talking about bringing a special guest to talk about men's health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I operate under the Paleo Counselor, but that's not my real name. My real name is Shannon Myers. I am a certified rehabilitation counselor, which is a holistic counselor that looks at the whole person. And I work for myself, and the Paleo Counselor is kind of my little marketing gimmick that I kind of work under. I'm an integrative health coach, an independent researcher, an adjunct professor at Drake University, and a fellow at the Harkin Institute. They let me do research there. Can you even believe it? And what am I doing? So I left the safe environment of working for the traditional medical model for the state, and I am bridging what I'm calling sick care, aka healthcare, to radical healing interventions and prevention. So everything that I do is self-funded. These videos that I make are pro bono work to help get information out to individuals. Everybody can heal. We all can heal. I wanted to bring my husband on here. This is Alex Myers. Hello. On here to talk a little bit about men's wellness and some of the ways that he has healed. And I'm going to do a little interview with him and to get into his brain and share some of his wellness tips from a male perspective. The Paleo Counselor embraces all gender expressions. I'm going to be using the term I identify. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Alex's pronouns are
he, his,
and him.
him.
But we, I express more of the feminine energy and he expresses more of the masculine, but we embrace all. So I'm going to be using these terminologies just for a place to start. Everybody that knows me knows that I only label things so that we can deconstruct them, but we need to have an entry point into the conversation. What is going on in our world? We are in the midst of a health epidemic that we've never seen before of epic proportions. 1 in 2 Americans has a chronic health condition. 1 in 4 has multiple chronic health conditions. 1 in 4 also has a mental health condition. And these are ones that are diagnosed. Men are dying at massive rates due to suicide, due to addiction, due to opioids, due to suffering in silence. Here's the deal. All emotions deserve and have to be expressed. Otherwise, they turn into negative expressions, which can be violence, drug abuse, overworking, just toxic negative behaviors. And sometimes our culture actually embraces some of these toxic behaviors. Work is a great example. Working harder, men a lot of the times get promoted because they numb their emotions through overworking and working harder, and because that's what they're told that they're supposed to do. And so this isn't to kind of get into that, but it is because I'm honoring the whole person. So I want to talk with Alex today. This is Memorial Day. What did you do earlier today?
I was invited to go to a community CrossFit workout with a coworker of mine who's a veteran, and it was to honor. It was under the Murph idea. I forget the gentleman's name, but he died in action, I believe, and he's got a workout named after him. So, about half an hour before it started, the workout, we did some Memorial Day shout outs to all the veterans. So it was great. It was a great chance to meet new people and to endure a very difficult workout.
It's great. So we are taping this on Memorial Day. We have childcare today, and so we're both home. And so we've been talking about doing this episode for a while. And we do want to acknowledge that it is Veterans Day. I come from a long line of veterans, and one of my grandfather had PTSD that you had after going to war lifelong. And so I am doing my part to kind of heal family wounds and getting this information out there. So I kind of want to talk with Alex today about what are the hats or the roles that you wear currently? Like, what different areas are you involved in life? What
Mhm.
are the labels and the roles that you take on?
Well, as with all men, I've made a lot of transitions in my life. I'm a dad now. Um, I do project management at a great company right now. Um, I transitioned from a time in my life that was heavily novelty seeking, a lot of drinking, a lot of alcohol, a lot of poor behaviors, and that's pretty common when you're in
Mhm.
your 20s. And in your 30s, it's fairly common to try to settle down, try to find someone special and settle down and have children. And so I'm not too out of the box when it comes to that, but I have had a lot of changes just in the last 5 to 10 years with how I perceive the world, um, figuring out different things that matter much more to me, and I would argue are much more important and will remain the case for the rest of my adult life. So,
So yeah, so your dad, you're professionally employed, you wear all these different hats, and it's, life is this really long journey to get us to where we are. And a lot of the times, like you said, in your 20s, you're learning about who you are, and sometimes the behaviors that you get involved in aren't that productive, and you have to start to lean into doing things a different way, kind of what you're saying. And the reason that I wanted to bring you on, especially not only because you're free labor, have to pay you and you're easily accessible, but a lot of men don't go to therapy, and a lot of men try to work on their own personal development, and they do it in a lot of different ways. And sometimes men get stuck. I work with a lot of men. I embrace a lot of masculine energy just in myself, and I have three brothers, and so I lean into that, to the work of working with men and families to help provide resources. And so I wanted to provide information today that is outside of a therapy setting. That's really self-help, self-hacking, biohacking, and just information, because men tend to lean into that more. And for me, I say go with it. Go with what works. And you have done that more than anyone I know. You've done so many self experiments and have read so many books and kind of leaned into doing the work. And I thought that you'd have some great resources to share. Let's talk about your childhood a little bit. What was little Alex like?
oh boy, um, my my mother and my father were very different people. They shared different values. So they divorced when I was younger. Not to go into too much detail, but as with many parents, my parents divorced when I was fairly young. I can't remember the time period. I'm going to say 5 or 6 years old. I moved quite a bit. I was a latchkey kid for a while. I did spend time with my father during the summers, and it was an adjustment. I wouldn't say I struggled more than anyone else whose parents have been separated. I learned a lot from my father. Certain masculine values, certainly, I learned from my father, and many feminine values learned from my mother. Um, she was one who was always trying to make sure that I was well fed, uh, exorbitantly so sometimes. And I tended to just go to comfort a lot with her, whereas my father was very much about work ethic, working hard, setting goals, having positive affirmations, just learning why it's important to struggle. And again, I benefited in different ways from both parenting styles, but it's for the best that they separated. They all have wonderful lives now. They're both remarried, so that was sort of my childhood. I don't know what else you want me to go into.
From an outsider perspective, and this isn't let everyone know that this is not counseling, because if I was counseling my husband, that is super unethical. And uh, no, we're having a conversation. I am a counselor, so I can't remove my brain from that. Um, the things that I, have heard from your story of your childhood, being raised by a single mom, and that struggle, and then your dad and your time with him, that was kind of, you're getting very different messages.
Mhm.
You've resolved those messages, and formed them into like a positive story. Another person who would know your story would put a lot of labels on you and diagnose you with different things like childhood trauma, an adjustment disorder, um, a lot of different things, which diagnosing can be very empowering for individuals to understand where the entry point for learning just a new way of being and coping, and the entry point for that. But for you, we call this kind of narrative therapy, is you have kind of narrated your story so that, you are respecting the good parts of both of your parents. And I really love that.
Yeah, but I would also say that, you know, as you get older, you get more mature, and you meet a lot of people. You learn not to, um, you learn to know where you've been relative to other people. So
Mhm,
um, there was a time when I compartmentalized a lot of any suffering I did experience when I was younger, any trauma I did experience through the wrong channels, whether it was eating or it was erratic behavior, neuroticism, narcissism, working out excessively, um, you know, disordered eating, a lot
mhm,
of things like that. But at the same time, it wasn't really sheltering anything that seeing other people in my life uh, suffer. I sort of had a relative approach to it, and I wouldn't say I'd say I've been pretty lucky, and I'm very, very grateful with how far I've come, what I've learned from. But at the same time, it's important to me that I realize that I'm luckier than most people. Everybody goes through some form of trauma, and how they define it for themselves dictates how well they handle it later in life.
mhm.
But I've been extremely lucky relative to anywhere else that was born, wherever I was born. So I've had a pretty good lot in life, I believe. So, but self belief again, that's important too, as
It is important.
Shan will tell.
Yeah, it definitely is important, but also not to minimize your own personal experience. And so what you're saying is we all suffer, and we all have things that we go through. And that's what makes us connected and to kind of lean in. One of the things that we both do is to realize that if we're going through a hard time, if you zoom out from that, there's millions of people that are going through that same experience as well. And so that's an entry point to lean in to other people, to get their perspective, and to talk with other people that are going through that same kind of adjustment or transition that you are. But like you were saying, in your 20s or even younger, leaned into it, expressed itself in a lot of different ways. And in your childhood, you lost 100 pounds at
I
one
did.
point.
Yeah.
I was trying to look for that picture to show you. There's this picture of you and your brother at the pool, and you have 100 extra pounds on you, and you look miserable. This picture has been shared wildly on social media, and just because that's not who you are today, and
Mhm.
people don't even believe that about you.
Yeah. I did struggle with uh, overeating when I was a young child. And again, maybe this is just me trying to validate that I realize other people have suffered more than me. But part of it was, puberty as well. So I went through a growth spurt. I was overweight, but I at first struggled with overeating until I was in my early teens. And then, for a variety of reasons, which men go through, boys go through, they start to find, in my case, the opposite sex, women, attractive. And I realized that it was going to be very difficult outside of a personality which was not well developed yet. Mainly because I was tired all the time because I was just constantly eating and taking naps. That was the majority of my day. I would come home from school and I would eat half a gallon of ice cream and a bunch of Doritos. And then I would fall asleep. And then occasionally I'd get to my homework. And that was my life for a while. I didn't have a lot of activity. I got bullied a lot on the bus coming home. Again, this is in my early teens before I hit puberty. And I decided primarily when I was with my father, and he saw the problem. And he was much more keen to address the problem because he knew that it was affecting my health and that I wouldn't get some of the things I wanted, including, girls, different things I cared about at that time much more heavily. A lot of those things just wouldn't happen if I stayed where I was. So my dad instilled in me work effort, which led to, just spending a lot of time exercising, watching my portion sizes. And then the weight started coming off, and then I started actually under eating because I wanted to see the results keep coming. And then when I started to see my rib cage and then I had no muscle tissue whatsoever, but I looked a lot better. I was a lot healthier. Then I started to get into weightlifting and things like that when I was in high school. One of the biggest things in high school for me was the weight loss was one thing, but after that, the next thing was my voice. So this deeper voice you hear now, I struggled for over a year deciding on whether or not to change my voice because it was very, very high pitched, very, very feminine. And one day at a high school party, one evening, I just decided to change. It was like a switch. It wasn't gradual, like most boys, teens my age. It was off and on, and everyone was freaked out for a while, but it had to happen. And so ever since, that was another big thing that had a big impact on me for about a year. It's just that whole transition. It seems minor because it happens to all guys, but it was pretty big for me.
Obviously, it's stuck with you because we're talking about it today.
Yeah. I just remember that a lot of people just had comments about it. Just one day, I just decided to change it. It was not gradual, and back and forth like a lot of guys my age.
So how did that cycle of eating, not eating, the body image, the exercise, how'd that go for you?
I was still learning things. I was exercising excessively. I think one day when I was with my father visiting him for the summer, I might have ran 20 miles in one day, and I barely ate anything. And I got sick from that. But I was taking it to one extreme, whereas before with the eating, I was taking it to the other extreme. And that certainly wasn't healthy. Going through high school, with the voice change and starting to become much more attracted to the opposite sex, I decided to start lifting weights and things like that. But I didn't really start getting into that until early in college. But yeah, all through that time, I still had a lot of disordered eating. Around the time when I was getting into college, I realized that there was this no-fail solution to all my eating problems. So when I wanted to eat a lot of food, but I didn't want to gain weight, I realized it was very easy just to vomit the food out, and didn't see any downside. I didn't look at the media or the information regarding the health downsides of that, especially longer term. I just felt like it was just an easy way out. It was a no brainer to me for a few years. This was like, oh man, this is a get out of jail free card. Um, Obviously, it turned out later on that it was not, but I struggled with that for about 5 or 6 years. So all throughout college, as I was gaining muscle mass, I tried to validate my eating habits through, well, this is just college and everybody eats
Mhm.
poorly and drinks alcohol. So I would try to strike this weird balance where I would work out and then have all this protein supplements and everything to, to gain muscle tissue,
Mhm.
which was fairly easy. I was growing and it was fairly easy to gain muscle. But then uh, once Thursday nights came, Friday nights, Saturday nights, those evenings became debaucherous.
Mhm.
I started to drink more, and then you get hungry when you drink, and I'd have entire pizzas, um, and that's when it actually got worse for a while because I was struggling to have these two identities of this masculine guy who was going to the gym all the time, but I struggled with the eating disorder all throughout college, and it was important to me to maintain that visual appeal that I wanted to achieve while still doing all the partying and eating
Mhm.
because I was actually a male cheerleader in college. And I remember trying out for the football team, and I didn't make it. But I was like, oh, I really want to meet girls, and I was interested in women's studies at the time because I wanted to learn
Isn't that
more.
your
I was
college degree?
Yeah, well, it was a minor. I have a minor in women's studies. Yeah, no,
Uh-huh.
few people believe that when I tell them, but I actually greatly benefited from that, and
Mhm.
in some odd ways that only have shown themselves now. Um, did you have a question?
Well, we've talked about this a lot, that period of your life with the
Mhm.
women's studies, and you've always said that that was kinda your way to understand, your situation with your parents and understand how to treat women well and kinda understand the feminine side of things, and we have a daughter, so I that's kind of why he said that it's kinda showing itself now that it was really valuable information to understand the other gender.
Yeah, it gave me a lot of perspective because I didn't understand all these concepts like the glass ceiling, how the idea of manipulation and control much more heavily affects women, not just because of physical differences, but for a variety of reasons.
Mhm,
Um, and just hearing the stories of all those women that would tell me how they've been sexually abused or they've been verbally abused, emotional trauma, and it made me realize that I have seen this from other men, either when I've been traveling or just in everyday activity, the toxic masculinity that presents itself.
mhm,
Um, and I'll say that having those classes and learning from those women made it extremely obvious to me what our tells were, what the things that we do to try to compensate or to validate our behavior through traditionally masculine means.
mhm.
And depending on what it is, I actually started to see those things as true character weaknesses, what some of them are. And I learned to avoid those things at all costs.
Mhm,
And I'm a much better man for it.
mhm.
So, well, at least I think I am.
Well, to me, you're a great ally because you're a male feminist, and not to put you in a category because we hate boxes. Like I don't. I hate being put into a box. That's why I have a whole career that's like, get me out of the box. I don't want you to define me and what healthcare or sick care is. But especially in today's culture, we have to start having these difficult conversations and kind of understanding. I mean, I do research in this area on the glass ceiling and the caregiver conundrum, and which is where a caregiver
Mhm,
conundrum is where a working mother really can't move
mhm,
forward because she's not only taking care of her children, but then also her aging parents. And,
mhm.
with motherhood, all the research is there based on women not being, we make 83 cents on on the dollar.
Mhm. One of the biggest things that I'll always remember was how important it was, um, through just reading different stories about a woman's role, in in society is different than men's, and um, the culture continues to change, but our economic system is built upon the idea that you have to produce labor, that gives you money. That's the intent. Um, but what's interesting about women is they have to basically play both sides of that. Um, they have to be a caregiver. That's certain expectations that we have, especially here. Um, and they also have to be professional. They have to make money as well. Um, and I always struggle with that because, from an economic perspective, the value that we know resides in building a human life from scratch and being the primary person in charge
Mhm.
often of doing that childcare. That's not reflected in gross domestic product, which is really important for us in America. It's just
Mhm.
not reflected. Um, and so all these children who are growing up to become adults who will eventually
Spoiler
work,
alert, we've all been children, right? All of
um,
us.
all that beginning of time, we don't put any economic benefit on top of that.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest thing I learned from being in women's studies, that I'm incredulous by it now.
Yeah.
It's just, we easily could put a metric behind that, as far as how many billions of dollars we save, or how many billions of extra dollars, trillions of dollars we make from sustaining a quality childhood,
Mhm.
and the roles that women are that have the burden of doing that more than men,
Right.
relatively speaking. Um, we don't place enough value on that, and it's everything, especially at the
Mhm.
beginning. So
All health outcomes are tied to those early years
mhm,
in life. That's
mhm.
how a lot of our genetics or epigenetics gets turned on, through those early years. And you're right. We've talked about this a lot, like quantifying paying mothers for their roles, and it's not valued in our society, but it's expected.
Mhm,
And you're a real advocate of that.
mhm,
And I think that goes back again to like your
yeah,
understanding of the fundamental
mhm.
issue.
And I think a lot about the future, and all I'll say is that caregiving, is going to be even more
Mhm.
important, because there's a lot of things we're automating today with technology,
Mhm.
where the ability to improve the human condition through, behaviors like being a mother, like taking care of children, like taking care of the elderly. Those things are going to be the very, very last things that we can automate with
Mhm.
intelligent machines. No matter how intelligent you are, there's always going to be human problems to solve. And having some consistency in the quality of the upbringing of a human life, has a bigger financial indicator, if that's what we're going to count as important in America,
Mhm.
than just about anything.
Right.
And the fact that we give it second fiddle, that we don't put a lot of focus on that, is the reason we're failing in many ways. And
Mhm.
it's the reason you see, happiness indicators, longevity indicators in other
Mhm.
countries much, much higher, because they start at the beginning instead, and they're proactive.
Mhm.
Instead of here, where the focus is sick care, you don't put any investment. Again, I'm being very, very general here,
Mhm.
in childhood upbringing, creating equality of opportunity there for the as many people as possible. It's just not a priority here,
Mhm.
um, and we fail because of that.
Mhm.
So we're starting to see that now more and more.
And will be in the future for sure. All the indicators are there. I could cite statistics for 50 some pages, and I am on this issue, because I study pregnancy and motherhood, as a fellow, which I still am shocked that I'm allowed to do that. But inferiority complex live in your face. Okay, so we talked about obesity, eating disorder, your childhood trauma, and how you kind of self-corrected and trying to figure out. Here's the deal: lessons are going to keep coming at you, and they're going to be shown as mistakes, failures, until you learn the lesson and you move on. That's just how life works. And it's kind of the stories that we tell ourselves as well, because we are kind of anxious beings that really don't know what's next. And so we try to fill in the story. Our memories are mostly false, and we remember things how we want to. I'm going to keep talking about this because it's very important with upbringing. Depending on your upbringing, 50% of your happiness is correlated to how happy those around you, not just your parents, but like your community, your zip code, your culture, 50% of that. So you kind of have to hack that if you were around a negative environment, poverty. Um, with a parent who had maybe had undiagnosed mental health condition, and that played out in your family, and so uh, learning those tools and learning those ways, because you can hack your happiness, and you've done that. So the last part of this conversation, we'll talk about how you've done that. The other two things that I think are important to discuss is your chronic insomnia that
Mhm.
you had. I think it's about 86% of all insomnia is men. Men have insomnia. And I will tell you, as a licensed health professional, that sleep is our restorative period. This is where we process all emotion, the events of the day. And if you are holding on to an emotion and you're not expressing it appropriately or at all, this is going to express itself as insomnia. Sleep is where we regenerate and restore, and connect and process. But a lot of times, especially with men and in workplace cultures, it's don't cry, don't show emotion, suck it up. And then the emotion gets expressed at unusual times with anger, with violence, all the negative aspects. So you say that you overcorrect, and we do this in our Western culture. It's very dualistic. It's like bad or good, negative or
Mhm.
positive. And uh, the hope here is to really find the balance. It's not thinking negatively or thinking positively. It's a quiet mind, and that's mindfulness and meditation, and then not overcorrecting with your story. It's not overeating or not eating at all. It's okay, and so we work towards the balance. Every emotion has that other aspect, the light and the dark, the yin and the yang. And as a professional that I'm working for, as a coach, work to find areas of opportunity. For you, the areas of opportunity I really feel were with biohacking, understanding your genetics, and epigenetically hacking that area, because your sleep was a disaster when I met you,
Mhm.
and you sleep 8 hours a night now, and you're completely transformed.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a superpower if you can address it and figure out the reasons behind it. um, One of the biggest reasons I think, excuse me, for me, was the eating disorder. I did a lot of research on it. The bulimia I had. Um, what it did was it changed um, how my pancreas was producing insulin. And insulin is a very important hormone. If it's out of whack, any mammal, including ourselves, I mean, you die earlier.
Drink some water.
No, I'm okay. Okay. Thank you. Um, so when I started to learn a little bit more about why I wasn't sleeping, that's one of the things that became obvious to me only after the first few years. I took a lot of sleep medications. I was on Ambien. I tried that for about a year. I took, before doing that, I tried melatonin. Hadn't really gotten into meditation yet. I thought about that a little bit later, and I do
Mhm.
that. I do that now. Um, but anything, lemon balm, kava, all these different supplements that try to calm the mind. But what I realized is it wasn't just calming my mind. Um, when I would get blood panels, and I only started going to the doctor during my professional years because I was a contractor for many years. So I put it off. Healthcare wasn't included. So I didn't even get healthcare. I just tried to eat as healthy as I can.
Spoiler alert, that's most of America, by the way.
Yeah. And so, um, and the blood panels I did get showed higher resting blood glucose.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Pre-diabetes or
yeah,
diabetes, depending on the number.
yeah.
1 in 3 Americans has pre-diabetes.
Yeah, and I think the lever is like at 90, and only then will most doctors try to prescribe you something to mitigate that. And for the most part, especially with type 2, I mean, the reality is it's all preventable.
It is.
If I would have never started the bulimia, which ruined my pancreatic beta cell function and just my pancreas in general, which made it easier for me to get, you know, it impacted everything.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, in college, all the drinking I did,
Genetically as well, your family is.
yeah, I had some diabetes that ran in my family, but the result was that
Mm-hmm.
my insulin levels were extremely erratic, and my blood sugar was unstable. So
Mm-hmm.
um, that's where much of all your inflammation in the body starts from. It's just your basic blood sugar. Everybody eats, and if people eat poorly for long enough, when you're a child, when you eat a lot of sugar, what do? You run around everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
You trash.
as you get older, those systems in your body, including your pancreas, including other bodily systems, they don't function as well. So instead, you end up taking a nap, and you end up causing all these blood sugar fluctuations that lead to all these other problems. For me, it was sleep. That was the most obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
I would have times when I would sleep maybe an hour a night for a week, and those were the most depressive times in my life, and that was probably when I was in my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using alcohol for a while to try to get to sleep. Obviously, that is short-lived.
Yeah.
There's never a correct dose, or that's going to scale forever. Um, and all the basic stuff I tried, but at the end of the day, I was taking drugs to help me sleep, and even then, they weren't working great. So I realized that even with all the things I was doing, nothing was going to improve how I slept until I got my blood sugar under control. When I realized how systemically important blood sugar is to
Mm-hmm.
regulating every single aspect of the body,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the thing that started my whole biohacking journey.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, being curious about life extension. But also at the same time becoming more comfortable with death, which is a whole nother thing we can talk about.
I
So
talk about that a lot.
yeah,
Because that's kind of at the root of, all of our compensatory strategies. I did write a self-funded research article on prediabetes that's on my website, the Paleo Counselor, because not a lot of uh, clinicians are focused on this because we're not focused on prevention, but you can prevent that. And just a couple things as hearing, your story, you've leaned into your genetics, and your genetics are an opportunity. They are not a death sentence. Your genes, your genes are just kind of your baseline. The environment is like a loaded gun that pulls the trigger. Okay,
mhm,
so just because everyone in my family has this, so I'm going to get this. No, if you understand about your genetics, there's a way. You do not have full blown diabetes. You have pre-diabetes. The number it's about 100 when he's talking about your fasting glucose level. The medical model looks at about 100 to 120, but the functional medicine model will drop it down to 84.
mhm.
And if you have, again, I love this information. I love that you shared this. Uh, this is not rehearsed. We didn't practice this before, but if you work with a functional or integrative medical professional, they can put you on either an herbal supplement or just like a really safe medication, unless you have MTHFR gene that's expressed, or the family of genes that are expressed, which 40% of people have it. Doesn't mean they're turned on. I can let you know if they are. That's kind of one of my areas of expertise. A lot of people try to put me in like the holistic box, but I'm more of an integrative, alternative, all research based, mind you, holistic, but and then precision medicine. I kind of lean into The really effective strategies are not being talked about because the research is 17 years behind. And so you looked at your genome, and then you run it through, and we can tell you guys what this is if you guys have questions about this later. You run it through another like a decoder, and you run it through. I'm not going to say who it is because I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. But you run it through that to see, what genes can be turned on, and then genetically you eat for that 20 to 60-ish%. I've seen anywhere from 20 to 70% of our weight is tied to our genetics. And that doesn't mean, oh, well, everyone in my family is overweight, so I'm gonna be overweight. No, that's the opportunity. So what gene has been turned on? How do you support that? And then going back, like you said, it's at the root, it was your insulin function because you turned on that pathway through the bulimia and the eating disorder, but then kind of your fear of death and kind of worrying about like existential things. And then kind of getting to the root of that is where the area of opportunity for you that you're now sleeping.
Yeah, and getting the blood sugar corrected was a big one. Analyzing my genetics was a big one. Again, there's all of these. It's a cottage industry now, so the cost of genetic testing, at least from the core sample, you can do your whole genome for a little bit more, but even that's going to get to a point in the next few years where it's $50. Right now, it's a little bit more expensive, but 23andMe, Ancestry, they all do the same thing. You can take that raw genetic data and upload it into these different repositories, all of which put it through a number of different algorithms, and they give you genetic likelihoods, different phenotypes. So, it'll tell you fun stuff like whether or not your earlobes are connected to your head, what your likelihood of lactose intolerance is, how well you deal with caffeine. So can you drink a cup of coffee at 9 p.m. and still go to sleep at 10? I cannot. That was a big thing that I found out. So I do some other hacks to mitigate that if I'm driving or something and I need an extra boost of energy, but I still want to be able to sleep. All these things, it's not that it's certain. So your genetics are, epigenetics are one thing, but the 23andMe, the raw data that you get from all these different services, you can upload them into these great databases that use analytics to give you certain likelihoods for your preponderance of certain scenarios. So I know my likelihood of addiction for a number of different chemicals. For example, I actually have a extremely low ability to get addicted to methamphetamines.
Well, that's good to know.
Yes. But not cocaine, for example.
Okay,
so that's a fun one. So that one, I got
some fun facts.
I got like a D- score. So apparently I should stay away from that. It goes into a fair amount of detail. Now, it's all likelihoods, right? So you have to think about these things as a moving target. These are all likelihoods. So if you have your blood work that you get done every 6 months to a year, you have that, and then you have your genetics, there's a lot of things you can infer. There's a lot of generalities you can make that will vastly improve your life from baseline, from just guessing. Shannon and I have learned a lot being interested about health, but it is truly the case that once you get your genetic panel done and you can look at some of your blood work, you start adding different things to your lifestyle. For example, both of us genetically don't make choline very well. Some people can make choline in their bodies a little bit better than others. I don't know all the detail on that.
Low choline looks like a mental health condition.
It does. So, we both increased our egg intake. We take other choline supplements, and those have been hugely beneficial to our cognition in the general sense, for example. There's certain commonalities that, Shannon will say are pretty common just in the US, for example, magnesium deficiency, vitamin D deficiency.
Oh, yeah, big time.
So those are just baseline ones that the majority of people are going to have. If all you did was do those, you'd see an improvement in blood sugar and things like that. So
you're like reading my mind, because I am going to do a self-funded magnesium study. I'm trying to put this information out there so that it's accessible, and trying to make it, I do it in a blog format, which is very, very intentional, because I want to make research that is real world and readable. And no one is funding this. No one's going to fund me for a magnesium study. Like, who's going to make money off of that? I'm a reformed pharmaceutical sales representative, and I understand just the money model there. I work with healthcare a lot, and I'm not interested. I'm not interested in that. So going back to what you're saying about your genetics, I lean into this work, and I'm the only one that understands precision medicine and how to do it at a population health level. I'm the leading expert in the country right now. Hashtag scary, but I am with precision medicine. If you are taking medications, a lot of people try to put me in the box where, Shannon, you're holistic and you are anti-medication. Oh no, I am pro-medication if you need to be taking medication, but you need to have a precision medicine or a pharmacogenomic panel run to understand genetically which dosage you need to be on and which medication and how those interact with your genes and your whole unique genetic makeup. I can facilitate this for you. Or if you're like, what are you guys saying about doing this on the consumer level or on the, like I have done a 23andMe or Ancestry, like how do I do that? I can help you get that done. I facilitate this stuff all the time. Super passionate about this because as someone who works in the mental health or has worked in the mental health field, what I will see is someone is in an acute crisis based on their medication. And there's a huge opportunity there to understand what you need to be put on and which dosage, because we metabolize medications in 5 different ways. And I've talked about this before, but if you're having trouble, reach out to me. I do free 15-minute consults with everyone. And I am one of probably 3 practitioners in the country that do, I've done work with genetics, but work with precision medicine with individuals. There's one other coach that I know that's interested in it. And I've got to assume that there's someone else out there. And please, if there are, more and more practitioners are talking about epigenetics, but really understanding the opportunity, I can help you there. The other thing I want to talk about, I want to talk about one thing that a lot of individuals experience too, outside of the genetics, but you experienced a job loss 2 in a row. So you were a manager for like medium-sized company, you're moving up in your career, but you experienced 2 job losses right in a row. And I think that this is one of the things where I see a lot of mental health conditions or symptoms of mental health express themselves, especially with males, because they a lot of times will lean into working. And because of what you said before, sometimes a family has to make a choice, and oftentimes it's the male, but I'm part of some female founders groups, and a lot of women are actually the primary breadwinner. It doesn't matter, whoever that is, when they lose their job, it doesn't matter if it's male or female. But you experienced 2 job losses right in a row. And for me, as not an outsider, because I am enmeshed in your life as your wife, this is where I saw you. I've done employment counseling for a long time, and I've always said, well, Alex, maybe you should network and da-da-da. This is where like the light bulb went on for you, and you leaned into doing the real work that we're here to do, that meaning and connection. Talk to us about the job loss and then how that really unfolded into your life's purpose.
Yeah. So before my current role, I was in a few different jobs. I had the opportunity to be managers in each of them. Unfortunately, both of those companies were acquired. But, regardless of the circumstance, even if it was something like negligence, which it wasn't, it was just because the companies were acquired. You still feel personally responsible, especially as a man. I mean, you think that it was something you could have done, something you could have done to circumvent the situation or continue to remain employed. So I spent a lot of time doubting my own personal skill sets, things I had. And it took me until the second time to realize that I was going about thinking about it in the wrong way, and that I wasn't doing enough to talk to people outside of just my wife to better understand my skills. That, turns out a lot of people are going through this right now. It is technology is changing, culture is changing. The average time that people keep a job is not very long. It is extremely rare to be in a job for 20 years anymore.
Yeah.
It just isn't the case.
Mm-mm.
There is it's not just because of exponential technology change. That's part of it, but change is happening very quickly. Businesses have to adapt more quickly, and that means staffing changes all the time. Those statistics are out there. So when people get frustrated about the old adage of, well, I want to be in this stable job for a decade, don't do that, because the reality is that that's just not what the statistics show.
Mhm.
And there's so many different ways to get out there. Networking became really important to me, and it was very difficult for me at first to think about networking in the right way. Originally, I thought about it as very transactional. It's just a bunch of people who are being fake to one another, and it might help you get a job, but at the end of the day, it doesn't feel good because everything feels transactional.
Mhm.
That was the story I kept telling myself, but it turns out that wasn't the case at all. It just depends how you think of the process. So I spent a lot of time meeting with different recruiters at first, but then I realized I enjoyed it more just going to networking events and meeting people organically. And I've made friends that way.
Mhm.
And the biggest thing I've learned from it is that you find a job so that you can make a sufficient amount of income. And it's the people that matter. Nothing else matters as much as the people that you interact with, your friends and your family. You see this in every blue zone, where people live at least 100 years old or more. Statistically, there's just more of them there.
Mhm.
The key factors are genetics isn't even number one. It's having conversations with people, acquiring meaning in life from those conversations, and then lifestyle. And then I don't even know if genetics is in the top three. Is it a factor? Absolutely. There's going to be some outliers there genetically where they just live a long time no matter what they do.
Mhm.
But if you want to increase that even further, it's how you handle life and people. It doesn't matter if you're considered introverted or extroverted. You still need people in some capacity. And the longer it takes people to realize that, the longer they usually suffer.
Mhm.
It's a core tenet of happiness, which then impacts everything else you do in your life, what you put in your mouth, what you eat, how you think about things. If you can't have that feedback from other human beings about how you're doing, caring about what other people are doing, it just makes everything else more difficult. So it's as important as anything else, because so much follows from that.
Mhm.
Dietary changes, lifestyle changes, all of those things are much easier if you have a strong social system of
Mhm.
people that care about you and that you care about them.
Mhm. So that's why I invited you on here to kind of share how you connected with one another. I mean, I saw you. We've known each other we knew each other in our 20s, and so we've been together a long time. But I saw you kind of repeat the cycle of the job loss, and then it was at that point kind of your lowest point. I mean, some setting and framework for that is we had just moved. We had a small child. I was very sick at the time. And, I come home and you're just in tears. My husband cries openly. He leans into being vulnerable. And, we leaned into it and we had a very transparent conversation. And a lot of times if they open up, it is with their spouse. And that's it. If they have a spouse. Okay. And you had opened up to me and I'm like, you've got to talk. You have so many skills and abilities and you have so many characteristics here, but he has to hear it from someone else that wasn't me. And so you leaned into doing the work and you love going to networking events now and you go there to truly connect and you've made lifelong friends through that and to be vulnerable with other men and to sit there and say, hey, I'm struggling as a dad too. I struggled with obesity too. I had an eating disorder. These are some things that I've learned about myself. And I see you working with other men and kind of forming your own, just a supportive community. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can come and just share our stories with non-judgment. This is where I've been. This is where I'm at. I'm in the process of learning and personal development. The more that we can show up for one another, we are most like the 5 people that we surround ourselves by. And if your environment right now is not supportive, I would really invite you to cultivating your tribe. I call it your tribe. Some people hate that I use that word. I don't really care or really what anyone thinks about anything, but he knows. But forming whatever that word is, forming that group, forming that support, leaning into doing that work, having some hard conversations with yourself and with other people, and to don't suffer in silence, because there's so many people that are, like he said, going through that same experience. And that is where I shared yesterday on my Instagram account, Johan Hari's work with connection, and showing that that's kind of at the root of all mental health symptoms. Our society is sick. You are not broken. Men, we have to start being vulnerable, crying, telling our stories, connecting with one another, not masking emotions, but processing them in real time. So we're sleeping and those kinds of things. I am more than happy to connect you with my husband. You're not really on social media. You're on LinkedIn. You're on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
At Alex Myers 83.
83. I know that you're going to step into doing more work with men in the future, because this is something that you just naturally do. You've mentored. I'm more than happy to, if you have questions, you want to talk with Alex more or have him come on. This again, I work with men. I'm working with 1 in 3 minutes all the time with families. I'm happy to get out in the community. You're going to be seeing more of me around town. I do these videos virtually. I'm going to be doing some more self-funded studies, like I said, on magnesium, but I have a whole list of things that I'm going to be bringing to you. I work as an integrative health coach, so blending the whole person together. If you have genetic information, that's great. If you have labs and panels, that's wonderful. I plug people in. If you're not a good fit, like I said, that free 15-minute consult is, if we're not a good fit, I am not going to set myself up for not serving you, because that goes against everything that goes against every tenet of being a counselor. But I'm going to plug you into who may be a good fit. There's so many great support groups out there, men's groups. You're looking at what sounds amazing. That program that in Kansas City, that the personal development program.
Oh yeah, it's called Landmark.
Landmark. So you're looking into that. I kind of looked at the research and the psychology behind it. There's just so many ways that you can be around other individuals and learn that we're all struggling, or I've struggled with that too. The more that you tell your story, the more that you open up. Again, you guys know that I love Brene Brown and her work on shame and leaning into that and being vulnerable. We got to do it.
Yeah, and that's the last thing I'd say is that I like to be as rational as possible. I like to think of things as objectively as possible. So I always try to relegate things to where's the data behind this, instead of, wow, this subjectively feels better, I'm going to keep doing that. And with people, it's really simple. You can look at your phone and you can read Twitter and you can get these dopamine hits, but that is a vicious cycle. They use it as an end well. You end up being more depressed when you
shame spiral.
After you finish than when you started. Now, is that easier? Absolutely. But then you realize what other chemicals are released in the brain when you simply go to someone's desk at your job and just start a conversation. Say, how are you doing? What's going on with you? That creates things like oxytocin, those things that everyone says gets created when you're at weddings and you're hugging everybody and there's just all this positive emotion. it turns out that you can keep building that, and that's a positive feedback loop. That if you continue to grow it, your confidence grows, all these other things grow, and that's what's sustainable. That's what's going to help you grow. And it's so easy to do. And pretty soon they're going to be able to prove that out. They're going to have an fMRI attached to somebody's brain where they're just walking around, and
they've done studies on like hugging and those in real life. So get off social media. I know that's terrible. I always say this message, like on social media, get off of it, get into real life. I kind of joke around. I downloaded this new app. It's called Life, and I'm doing it. I'm getting more involved in it. You're not even on. You tweet some things once in a while, and you're on.
You got to find the right balance.
You do. You have to find the right balance, and you have to find the right people to support you and to be able to really be seen, to have someone that's supportive. And if you don't have anyone, this is your bridge to working with a therapist or a counselor or a coach, and you can work with a coach even if you have supportive people, but you're not getting to where you want to be. But there are dope human beings that are working on themselves, that have been through hard things, that are willing to share their story, like my husband has today, hitting all of these topics to show how he's healing, how he's working on his personal development journey. I thank you so much for coming on here. I know that, we're not working today, and I'm forcing you to get on my YouTube channel. What's your final thought that you wished men would know about mental wellness or men's health?
Oh boy. Again, it goes back to people. Feeling a connection with another man, and feeling you can be vulnerable with them, that you could share anything. That's going to grow you more than just about anything else, and that requires being vulnerable. The different hacks we can talk about in another episode. The different things that I do to maintain health. It's all goes back to doing that same thing, which is, how do I improve my ability to make the best use of time with others? Is my cognition strong? Am I eating well? Do I feel good? So that it's easier to do that same thing that makes me happy, which is talking to people. If I haven't slept, if I'm eating poorly, I'm not going to be able to do that thing that's going to make me live longer, which is human connection. So it's all a system.
And that's why we're trying to connect to you on this YouTube channel, to tell you it's okay to be vulnerable, and that's how you grow. And especially if you're a man, to talk with another person that you can identify with your experience, or just to talk with someone and not be judged, and just to be fully seen as a human being. That's what we're all here for. That's how we all connect. Everyone suffers. We all can heal. There's another way. I'm trying to show you other ways, slowly but surely, getting the information out there. I'm on all social media. Not all. There's so many. I can't even keep up. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram.
More than me, and that's okay.
I run a business.
Yes.
Right. You can find me. You can reach out to me if you have a question. I try to be accessible and be a resource. I answer every single question that comes at me. And thank you so much for watching this. We're going to end this. Goodbye. Goodbye.